Welcome ladies and gentlemen to the 46th installment of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links Best Deck series. Today I'll be showing you a deck based around Bujin monsters. Just so you guys know, the Bujin archetype still isn't top tier yet, it's still fairly mid-range, so this deck is not a highly competitive deck, it's not something I'll be using in the World Championship qualifier or anything anyway, but it's still alright if you guys are looking to play this deck, to just win a few games and have a bit of fun. Alrighty, now here's the deck list. This deck, first thing you'll notice, is rather large. This is because it's a grass's greener deck. The more cards in the deck, the more cards you get to send with the graveyard using that grass looks greener. The next thing I'm going to point out right now is during the gameplay you won't see me use the card Bujin Regalia, because that's because when I was doing the gameplay I didn't use the card, but after a few more tests recently I thought it's a lot better to have this card in the deck than to not. It just seems like a bit of a waste to use Mikazuchi without having a Bujin trap card or spell card in the deck, because using his effect will thin out your deck and it will also give you just a free card draw. So running more than one of them is probably bad, but not running any at all is just horrible. And the last thing I'm going to point out is if I had more than 2 Ties of the Brethren, I would use the third copy, I just only own 2 of them. As for cards that I would replace in the deck, it's more situational depending on what you're coming across the most, as each of the Bujingi monsters cover a different area. Some stop you being killed by monster effects and spells and traps, and some stop you being destroyed by battle damage, some help you win battles, so it's more what you come across. If you're coming across a lot of one particular deck, it's best to run the Bujingi monsters used to counter that particular deck. Hence, if you don't have a particular card in the deck, you just run more of the counter that you need. Alright, now I'm going to go through the strategy behind the deck. This one may be a bit of a long one as there's a lot of cards to go through. So the main strategy for this deck is actually kind of simple. It's a slow control deck. It works by having as many Bujingi monsters as you can in your graveyard and as many Bujin monsters as possible on your board. So how an average turn goes, for your first turn will be you will use restart on your starting hand if you don't have that grass looks greener or Ties of Brethren in your starting hand, as they are the strongest cards in your deck. You will then play either Bujin Yamato, Bujin Arasuda, or Bujin Mikazuchi onto the board, activate Ties of Brethren on one of those, and it'll bring out the other 2. And then if you have a Grass's Greener in your hand, you'll activate it. It is kind of important that you activate Grass's Greener after you've used the Ties of Brethren if you have that combo in your hand, as you do not want your Mikazuchi, as you only have one of him in the graveyard, you want him on the board. And that's when you end your turn and let it go to the end phase, because that's when the fun begins. So during your end phase, this is when Bujin Yamato's effect activates, which allows you to add 1 Bujin monster from your deck to your hand, and then discard a card. So you'll add one of your Bujingi monsters depending on the situation. Normally it'll be a Bujingi Sinyou, which I'll talk about in a moment. We'll add that to your hand, and then discard it to the graveyard. This will then proc Bujin Arasuda's effect, which allows you to draw a card and discard a card. So again, the card you'll discard from your hand will be a Bujingi monster if you have one. This will also proc Bujin Mikazuchi's effect, which allows you to add 1 Bujin spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, which will be the Bujin Regalia, as that's the only one you have. So that's basically how the main deck will function. Now that you've got these 3 on the board, you'll just keep sending more and more Bujingi monsters to your graveyard, and the more Bujingi monsters you have in your graveyard, you can then use all their effects to protect your monsters and control the board and control the game. So here's how the Bujingi monsters work. Centipede is used to destroy a spell or trap. Hare is used to stop one of your monsters being destroyed by battle or card effect. Quilin is used to destroy an opponent's monster. Sinyou is used during the damage step to make one of your Bujingi monsters have bonus attack equal to the attack of your opponent's monster. And Turtle is used to negate an effect that targets one of your Bujin monsters. So generally the one you're going to want the most in there is the Sinyou on your first turn, as this will make sure that your monster stays alive from battle. Then you want to add a Turtle or a Hare, as both of those are used to keep the monster alive. But again, as I said earlier, it is about the situation you're in, what monsters you want in the graveyard. So each of these cover a different situation, so depending on what you're in, choose accordingly. All of the extra spell and trap cards in the deck that are not that Grass Looks Greener or Ties of Brethren are used purely to push this control playstyle of the deck. Tribute to the Doomed and Offerings to the Doomed both have a very similar effect, both destroy a monster and both come with a downside. The good thing about this deck though, and these cards, is their downside doesn't really affect the deck at all, as discarding a card normally just means you discard a Bujingi monster, which is good for your deck, and skipping your draw phase is fine, as this deck just draws cards regardless. Similar to Tribute of the Doomed, the downside of Divine Wrath, which effect just negates a monster's effect, is it requires you to discard a card, but with this deck you just discard a Bujingi monster, so it doesn't really matter. And the final trap card of the deck is Bujin Regalia. This is the card that you will search for using Mikazuchi's effect, and basically it just allows you to add one Bujin monster from your graveyard to your hand, or return one of your banished Bujingi monsters to the graveyard. So that's pretty much the strategy behind the deck and how the deck functions on a normal basis, but there are a few extra tips I'm going to give to try and help you out. The first is look at each of the Bujin's bonus effects, as each of the big Bujin monsters does have an extra way of it being special summoned except for Yamato. So if you don't have Ties of the Brethren, you will often have to use this bonus effect to get extra Bujin monsters out onto the board. This applies specifically to Bujin Hirume, which is used only if you don't have Ties of Brethren. The next tip I'm going to say, and I'm going to stress again, is make sure to use Ties of Brethren before that grass looks greener, as you don't want to send Mikazuchi to the graveyard. And the final tip I'm going to give is read the situation you're in, as the situation you're in is what cards you're going to want to send to the graveyard during your end phase. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for the talking part of this video. If you liked, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment if you've got any questions. Make sure to sponsor if you're feeling generous. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.